Two successful labor notes, Troublemakers Handbooks. He's written books about the labor movements of Mexico and Indonesia. He more recently has been very active as a supporter of the immigrant workers movement in his home state of Ohio. And that was the launching pad for his campaign last fall for senator from Ohio, as the candidate of what hopefully will be an ongoing Buckeye socialist network. Brother Dan LaBotz.
Thank you. I feel like everyone here, including the people in the audience, have a lot more electoral experience than I do. But let me tell you about the experience I had. This is the first campaign of the Socialist Party since 1936 in the state of Ohio, and so it's something of a novelty, to say the least, to have the Socialist Party on the ballot. The objectives of the campaign, as I saw them, we wanted to do some education about the notion of democratic socialism. We wanted to do organizing. We wanted to meet and be active in networks. And we wanted to hook up the campaign with the existing social movements, but there were very few social movements in that period that I was running for office for about the year period of the 9 months period of that. The larger dynamic, as you say, is very important. I think I ended up with 25,000 votes in Ohio. It's less than 1%. It was half of what the Green Party governor candidate got, and it was less than 2 Tea Party candidates for Senate got. So I didn't do as well as the Tea Party. Still, I think very few people would have thought there were 25,000 socialist voters in Ohio. So I don't think it was a bad showing. But the larger dynamic was that Rob Portman, supported, who had been President Bush's free trade man, I think long-term congressman, was running for the U.S. Senate as the Republican candidate, backed with a $10 million war chest for that office. He was opposed at the beginning by 2 rival Democrats, Lee Fisher, a very standard sort of liberal labor Democrat out of Cleveland, and Jennifer Bruner, who people might call more the progressive social issues Democrat, running as opposed to him. The Democratic Party completely stiffed her and shut her down, would give her no money, cut her off, and her voters were very resentful. And I picked up a couple of her organizers who supported me in different ways in the campaign. One who was a Cleveland person and one who was at Oberlin College, who were so resentful about the way the Democrats had treated her. They didn't necessarily like or agree with me. They told me frankly. Well, one of them did. One did at Oberlin. But the other guy from Cleveland says, I don't really agree with you, but I want to see Fisher punished. I want to see the Democrats punished here. So the larger dynamic was that. During the campaign, I might note, Portman had only raised $2 million in the campaign, and he started to fall behind toward the end by between 10 and 20 points. So the fact that he was so far behind meant I faced, in the last month or 2 of the campaign, I faced no spoiler argument or whatever. That is, he didn't stand a chance. So I think that was a factor. About this campaign, we talked about maybe some kind of nuts and bolts things. Very important that Ohio had a secretary, a terrible secretary of state named Kenneth Blackwell, who really helped the Republican Party. He was accused of purging working class and African American voters, and also the state had a long record of making things very difficult for third parties. Consequently, both right and left parties, that is, parties to the right of the Republicans and the left of the Democrats, had brought lawsuits against the state of Ohio, which then really, the lawsuits threw out the existing election law pretty much, gutted the existing election law. And Jennifer Bruner, who was one of the Democratic Party candidates and Secretary of State, created the election law then by fiat. And she established very, very low hurdles. I think they wanted no more lawsuits. For me to get on the ballot as a candidate for the U.S. Senate, I only needed to have 500 petition signatures from anywhere in the state. And so that was extremely low barrier, very easy. And we collected 1,200. You could not have more than 1,300. So we collected 1,200. I collected 500 personally in front of my grocery store and library. But I should say that going into this campaign, one of the first things I asked the Socialist Party when I talked to them about becoming their candidate is, did they have a lawyer? I thought that was the first and most important thing from my point of view, because of the history of electoral barriers and ballot access problems and so on. And we had a terrific lawyer, a pro bono lawyer named Mark Brown, who had a lot of experience in cases in many places. And having Mark Brown as an attorney gave me the confidence to want to enter the campaign. Had there been no attorney, I would not have run, frankly. I felt I need to have that in place. Secondly, my wife will not let me touch money because I'm so irresponsible. So I needed a treasurer. And I chose as the treasurer a friend of mine. I mean, I didn't choose him, he chose me. He was a friend of mine that we worked with on issues fighting against the constructions of prisons in Cincinnati, with a city with a declining population, county with a declining population. Both the Republicans and then the Democrats wanted to build a new 800-bed jail. We fought that, and one of the guys who worked on it with us was a DSA member whose name is Reg. And Reg said to me, Dan, I proposed running for it. He said, I'll give you $500 to start the campaign, I'll loan you my car for the summer, and I'll be your treasurer. And I knew that Reg is experienced as a treasurer, extremely responsible. To me, the nuts and bolts was having somebody who could manage the money of this campaign, took entire responsibility. So I never had to think about the law, and I never had to think about money. Thirdly, I needed an organizing staff. So after we raised a little money, I hired a young man who was a student activist, but a very mature young guy. His name is Mike. He's a wonderful person. He had been active on a campus in Tennessee and helped to organize a statewide fight by students against budget cuts. Then he worked for SEIU around health issues in Tennessee, and so he had experience with unions and with older folks, and he had the maturity to work. And I hired him to be the organizer, paid him like I think it wasn't, a few $100s a month, lived in my house, ate my food under my complete direction, 24 hours a day. A great person to have working. The one thing I would say, lesson I learned, every time I had another $1,000 per month, I would have hired another organizer. I would have said staff, paid staff organizers. I would have, if I did this again, I don't think it's likely I will do it again, but I would have put another person, and I would have put organizers on staff in every city. I think that was a lesson for me that was learned from this. Fundraising, we raised, compared to the $10 million and $2 million of the other candidates, we raised $10,000. That we had one $1,000 check, we had a couple $500 checks. We had a bunch of $100 checks, and we had a lot of $25, and people who gave us sent us $1 or $2 in the mail. It was very, but $10,000 allowed me to jump in the car after work teaching Spanish to first to 8th graders every day, and jump in the car and drive to Columbus. A couple days I jumped in the car at 3 in the afternoon and drove to Cleveland to get there by 7, to go to Toledo to get there by 7. And I think we did on, I don't know, I was trying to figure the miles, between 10 and 25,000 miles driving around Ohio. We drove all over the place, mostly after work. A couple days I took off work. It was hard to take off work when you work with little kids, But I drove to Toledo to Cleveland and built that. So I felt that was, part of the conception I had is it had to be an organizing campaign. I agree very much with, I think it was Howie who said, it's plain language, go out and speak to people. I think experience working with workers, you speak in a straightforward, direct, honest way. It's very important to be honest and to be direct and to say what you have on your mind, true to your principles. I like the point that you made. You can sleep every night, you say what you believe in. I even had to have the office to carry it out, so that's the great test, and I admire those of you who are dealing with that responsibility. So I would say there's difficulties reaching the labor movement. We were shut out really of the labor movement in terms of, even in my hometown where people asked me to be able to speak. African American voters are understandably going to be loyal to the first black president. They have all my understanding for why that people were going to support an African American president, but you could engage African American voters on the issues in Ohio. But it's a very difficult terrain, I think, on that, the question of the black voters. I guess I better stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan.